Deconstructing DJG. I am DJG, and I am here with my friends TK and Rick. I don't have a fun catchphrase like DMI for TMI or TMI for DMI, whatever. But we are here to talk deconstruction, the way that our beliefs have changed since we have left the church. And tonight specifically, we are going to be looking at children's programming. I have a few of like kind of the top three evangelical kids shows from the 80s. And then I'm going to compare and contrast from a very popular one from the 90s until today. All right, folks, are you ready to see this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So ready. Bring it on.
So when I was a missionary kid, we were constantly on the road. And so that meant we needed things to keep us engaged while we were on these hours and hours long trips constantly. Patch the Pirate was a very big part of that. And I remember some of the things that they did, the more explicitly racist things. I was like, that doesn't feel right, even when I was a kid. And now that I have gone back and listened to some of them, because a bunch of them are on Spotify, I do find it interesting that they have basically scrubbed the entire internet of this one particular CD that was, oh gosh, what was it called? It's all about the Alamo, and they have a bunch of exceedingly racist caricatures of Hispanic people. So yeah, I understand why they have scrubbed the internet from this. But it was frustrating because like I couldn't even find a website that had the lyrics written down. Like there was nothing of this. So Patch the Pirate apparently has good lawyers.
I was just gonna say you should post if you want to try to dig it up. Try to go on like the lost media forums and see
Oh,
if anybody has it.
that would be
Because I'm sure
phenomenal.
people would get really like weirdly invested in this.
That's a
Yeah,
good
you
point.
could crowdsource finding it.
Right? I have to buy it for $30, guys. Only this dude on eBay that has a unlisted auction is in cahoots with that. Yeah, I picked a couple of choice songs from Patch the Pirate. I have edited them for time. But yeah, we'll talk about the theology when we come back in a second.
Sounds good.
Taught a parable about a sower seed. He taught some soil is arable, but other soil has weeds. Sometimes soil is hardened down, sometimes filled with stones. And just like soil, my heart's the ground where gospel seed should grow. Jesus taught of worldly cares, of weeds and thorns that rise. He warned of weak and shallow faith, where roots cannot survive. When we're faced with stony trials, some will fall away. So hear his words and follow him, and cultivate your faith. Jesus taught.
So yeah, I love the gaslighting in infancy. Like, if you fall away from the faith, that means that you had a weak and stony heart full of weeds.
It's the no true Scotsman
Oh, yeah.
fallacy from birth. And the way that, certain people think that they're trying to indoctrinate our kids. And I'm like, what is this? What is this?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that. Like,
We're fine with indoctrination as long as it's what we agree with.
as long as it's my indoctrination, then it's okay.
Right,
Just
because
someone
then it's
else's.
not indoctrination. You're training up a child in the way they should go.
Ugh.
This next one is from an album that they did that is entirely young earth creationism trying to refute evolution.
Oh, okay.
never catch me scratching and eating my fleas, and you'll never see me swinging from a coconut tree. My daddy's
Oh my
never
God.
my mommy's nowhere, so you can't make a monkey out of me. No, you can't. No, you can't.
I'm sorry,
No,
somebody
you
got
can't
paid to write this?
make a monkey out of me.
It's very much the same energy as the billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth.
Oh my gosh, I have not thought of that song until you.
Right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it is so crazy watching things back that it's like, oh, everybody didn't watch this. Everybody's parents weren't pushing this on them.
And of course, because it was the 80s, my parents would listen to things like Rush Limbaugh when we weren't listening to Patch the Pirate.
Oh God.
God, that's horrifying.
Right? I was using the phrase assumed room temperature at way too young of an age to be that cynical and nihilistic.
Oh my gosh. It's like to go from the cheery pop of this like crazy words with this like kid tune to just like a raving old lunatic and Rush Limbaugh. Like, I'm surprised you didn't have whiplash every day as a child.
Right?
That reminds me of one of those like parody like ASMR videos where it'll be like Minecraft music, but your parents are arguing about getting a divorce in the background. Like here's Patch the Pirate with Rush Limbaugh screaming in the background.
I know this is probably a common thing, but a lot of us kids growing up in the church dealt with a lot of anxiety around what is sinful and what is, maybe against the rules, but not necessarily sinful. And is this thing that you did accidentally going to condemn you to hell? All of that.
I hated that growing up and I still deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same.
It's like, is
So,
this gonna be the one thing that just fucks up my whole life?
right, right. So, this next song is one that I kid you not is intrusive thoughts for me. Like, still in my 40s, this song pops up in my head every single time I think about anything that has risk involved, right? Yeah.
Then I wonder why we all have such bad anxiety.
The example they gave was that your shirt was gray versus whatever other color it was supposed to be. Like, what? You're
That
gonna
song
caution
is so
kids?
confusing.
Dear God.
It's it's so incredibly toxic and harmful, and like this should be obvious that it is not something that should be presented this way to children.
I feel like if you look at that type of stuff at a deeper level, it's just absolutely shaking your foundation of trusting yourself to, I don't know, wear gray without consequences. And it just like, it makes it so that you're so like hyper aware. There are some days where I still feel like I'll notice that I just take every thought captive, that
Mm-hmm.
old saying,
Ugh.
um, all day long. And by the time the end of the day comes, I'm so exhausted. And it's just like, when can I stop doing this? But it's been so ingrained in me from such a young age of like, you have to take every thought captive to make sure that it's not sinful. And it's tiring, exhausting, actually.
incredibly exhausting.
No, that's a big one for me too. And the thing was with me, I don't know if either of you have read Jeanette McCurdy's memoir or not.
Ooh, I keep meaning to,
Yes,
but I
it's
have not.
fantastic.
The way she describes her OCD symptoms and how it kind of correlated with like religion for her growing up, that was me 100%, like to a T.
Hmm.
And I cannot imagine how much of this kind of bullshit would have fueled that for me. Like, I still do struggle with it, and at least on a surface level, it really doesn't have anything to do with religion for me anymore. I'm sure
Hmm.
on like a subconscious level, like a part of the reason I'll be afraid of certain things is because of like my upbringing, but
Right.
I kind of want to, every time I have intrusive thoughts, I kind of want to imagine it in that little song though, and it might make it a little easier for me.
It's kind of like taking intrusive thoughts and imagining them in Donald Trump's voice. Way easier to discount when it sounds like Donald Trump.
It's like, God, that fucking guy again.
All right, so we are moving on to our second children's show slash cassette tape series. This is Psalty the Singing Songbook. And I want to say he actually predates Patch the Pirate, because the videos of the show absolutely look like Sesame Street from the late 70s.
No, this was one from my partner's childhood.
Oh,
And there was one time we got really, really drunk and watched one of them, and like I don't remember how it ended, but I think one of us had a mental breakdown.
That sounds about right.
yeah, I believe that. All right, so here's our first bit of salty.
Make me a servant, humble and meek. Lord, let me lift up those who are weak, and may the prayer of my heart
Oh,
always
gracious.
make me a servant, make me a servant, make me a servant today.
A while ago we were talking about um that joy acronym, Jesus first, others next, yourself
Hmm.
last. This is
Hmm.
also part of that same theology, that you are to be a servant to others. You should always think of others before yourself. And in a way, that's right. Like, you should always be considerate of those around you, but not at your own peril.
Yeah, that's one I've internalized in a pretty bad way that I'm still trying to
Yes.
like unlearn.
It's
The
so
thing
hard
is,
because jobs, when I was in my early 20s and I had like no job experience, they loved my servant's heart. They loved the way that I would, drive myself to nervous breakdowns to be one of their top performers or whatever. And like outside of the spiritual area, this kind of thing is highly problematic.
The vast majority of like my communications online in high school were me like talking people that like I didn't know out of unaliving just because of like this kind of shit being like programmed into me as a kid.
totally disregarding your own mental health and
Yep.
everything else just so that, you don't want to be selfish.
And you still get things like Allie Beth Stuckey, who wrote her book, You're Not Enough,
You're not
and That's
enough, and
Okay.
that's okay.
And the
Hmm.
Girl Defined girls jumped onto that. And it's just so gross the way they invalidate and dehumanize and condescend to people who are literally just taking care of their own health. I mean, you wouldn't talk that way to someone who has to give themselves insulin shots. You would not talk to someone like that who has to go through chemo. So, why on earth Are we making it a moral failing to actually make sure that your brain is in good order?
Well,
The
absolutely.
thing about so many people who would say to me, well, if you just trusted God enough, you wouldn't have to take that medication. And I so wanted to grab something and just smash their leg and then be like, if you believed in God enough, that would heal on its own.
Right?
You're not going to do that because it doesn't make any sense.
Ibuprofen? No, you just need Jesus for that headache.
Exactly.
Right.
I didn't remember how Salty looked at all, and I don't know why I didn't remember this. Um, when people talk about making men masculine again, this is just what I want to present and agree with them.
I guess it makes sense to have him coming out of the spine, but I don't understand why they didn't have his face on the front of the book.
I know.
Yeah, coming
I'm
out the
very
spine
confused
was
by the
a
anatomy of
choice.
this.
Yeah.
No, it just kind of is mind-boggling to me that the people that complain about drag queen story hour would show their children this. And
Yes.
it's perfectly acceptable and fine. I
Mhm.
don't I don't get it.
Because the people who created Christianity were men and they hate women and they would rather another man dress up like a book than a woman.
You know,
Yeah,
that's
That's
true.
the only thing I can think of.
They say that viewing, PORN, can be a symptom of a deeper sin. Anxiety and depression are two of these sins that they bring up.
Wait,
And
that causes you to look at it?
yes, anxiety and depression are deeper sins that can cause you to do
Mhm.
things like look at PORN.
Gotcha.
Her comments section has been pretty spicy because of that. And this seems to come around in the fundy circles every 6 months or so. And I'm really getting tired of it because those of us with mental health conditions trust and believe if we could not have it, if we could just magically get over it, we would love to. We would absolutely love to.
It's like the meme where it's like, you have anxiety, don't be anxious. Oh, I'll fix.
All right, so let's get into the next piece of nightmare fuel from Salty. Check out those costumes, yo. Like I said, late 70s Sesame Street, right?
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
nightmare fuel.
This is so disturbing. It's like that chick on TikTok that does the kid face.
I was gonna say it reminded me of the YouTuber Drew Monson for some reason, and I don't know why.
Oh my gosh, I can totally see that.
I really don't know why.
Why is that obviously preteen girl dressed up like a 6-year-old and speaking like a child?
Can
That's
anyone
weird.
say the fundy voice that Michelle Duggar had?
I know what you're talking about, but I can't do it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He just calm and soft and it's like, oh my God, stop it. I feel like is somebody holding you hostage? Blink twice if you need help, woman.
Exactly. It's this over infantilization, especially of women.
Yes.
There's just this constant talking down to them. And as much as they'll say that they are not the same as old school people that don't allow women to speak when they're in church, not even Sunday school, they have to be silent, they have to have their husband tell them what the Bible says. They may not be that extreme, but they are still talking down to women as if they need that.
It's just so disgusting because it's like, well, obviously, with your little woman brain, we have to explain this to you. in a way that you'll understand. And it's just like, no. I grew up in a household where it was said by my mother that women can't be president because, they may just have their period and then start a war. And what would we do? Women just cannot lead countries. And it's like, how many wars were started by women in the last
1,000
300
years.
years?
I mean, I heard the exact same thing at my house. Like, women were entirely too emotionally driven to be able to be effective leaders. And yet,
Yes.
they trained me and my sister up to be leaders for Christ. And it's like, I'm I'm not sure that you're noticing the cognitive dissonance here.
No, no, no,
I am
no, no.
absolutely stealing this from some TikTok comedian whose like name I don't remember. But like when women like go crazy and like emotional and get upset, somebody's like car might get keyed. But like when men get upset, like whole groups of people die.
Exactly.
Agreed. It's very gaslighty. Well, you little women, you just can't. And it's completely, obviously, we all know, leaving out huge swaths of people that don't identify with either one. You can't just be like, well, if it's a woman, then you speak to them in this way. And if it's a man, then you got to speak to them in this way. And they pound their chest. And it's like, but what if it's not like immediately obvious? Then how do you
Right.
talk to someone?
What level of
You
respect
know,
are you supposed to give this person if you can't tell that they're a man?
yeah, like if I don't know what your genitals are, how am I supposed to talk to you? But we're the people who always talk about how other people want to know the nasty stuff, y'all. Get
Get
it
your
together,
mind out
please.
of the gutter. So, this week's episode of the Excommunication Station podcast was about tithing. And they were discussing how not just, 10% of their income, or one of them said 30% of their income. And I was like, whoa. But, outside of the monetary tithing, they were expected to help clean the church, who volunteer to teach VBS, to volunteer to teach Sunday school, to lead youth group, to do missions projects, to play the piano. Like, all of the parts and pieces in these evangelical churches required volunteers. And basically, the only people that were paid was the pastor and possibly like a assistant pastor or youth pastor. But in most cases, at least in my circles of evangelicalism, because we never did the big megachurch thing, it was always unpaid labor. It's funny because I work in design partly, and I will joke that, do you know why I'm a good designer? Well, it's because I've been designing bulletin boards, VBS flyers, etc.,
Mhm.
since I was in grade school. Like, I have a visceral reaction to cutting construction paper.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The
Or that
concept,
big cutter.
yeah, or like cutting letters out of anything. I
Mm-hmm.
invested in good markers and craft paint the second I became an adult and needed to make like protest signs or something. I was not about to cut out the letters. There's so much time that we all put into the church and got absolutely nothing back. Did the church help us when we fell behind on bills? Did the church help us when uh, people were ill and needed additional time off from work, but it was unpaid? There's they would occasionally pick a pet project or whatever, and we'd give a love offering to that particular family or person or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But generally
Mm-hmm.
speaking, like, the church was not there to provide any sort of meaningful support that was not in the form of preaching, worshiping, fellowshipping.
In like most of the churches I have been to, like I would say like a good 80% of its production like at least in the youth group section, was done by minors, unpaid. I don't think I've ever talked about this on here, but when my grandfather was younger, he was in a Christian heavy metal band. Please, no one try to sleuth. They went nowhere. Nobody knows who the hell they are. You aren't gonna figure it out. Um, but he really wanted me to get into doing music. So I would be forced to like do the whole like church band shit, even though like I did not want to at
Mhm.
all. Especially post like age 12 or 13. Like I hated my voice. I just didn't want to do that anymore. That was very heavily encouraged. And that entire band was made up of minors.
And
Like
while I can
it.
appreciate certain things do require unpaid volunteers, like I work with a lot of nonprofits, and for some of those projects, we do need people to help us out. But because it's a nonprofit and our funds are going towards these programs, as a matter of financial transparency, we are not using more than X percentage of money on, payroll. You have to keep it
Mhm.
under a certain percent to ensure that you are effectively being a good steward of the money that people are donating to you. But at the same time, it is entirely too frequent that they will allow people with no vetting whatsoever to work with children. Somebody shared this a while ago, but there's a particular insurance company that exists solely for churches, missions, and other ministries to have CSA and SA liability insurance, and they will
Yep.
have a list of best practices. And number one on those best practices is to do a background check on anyone that is going to be working with children. And it's like, why is this lowest bar possible having to be suggested by an insurance company because the churches have not thought to do that themselves? Like, if
Yeah.
sinners are so evil and driven by Satan, how can you be sure that Mr. Johnson who comes in is actually a Christian if you don't know anything about him other than he's the cousin of Daryl over there? And like, there are really, really depressing statistics about how often certain groups of people are assaulted, and it's the kind of thing where the church should be the haven from those kinds of crimes, but instead we see almost a more concentrated version of that inside the church.
No, like literally the whole time you were talking, I was thinking about this dude who assaulted my friend at the one like mega church that I went to at one point, and like I want to deck that man in the face so bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing happened to him. He got away with it, but like I oh my god.
It's a whole thing. So yeah, Salty was quite something. I remember loving those songs growing up and like really taking them to heart. And now that I'm listening to them back later, and I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. Okay, now I know where that particular intrusive thought came from.
It's weird to hear the voices of things that will pop into your mind sometimes. It's like,
Yes.
oh shit.
Oh my gosh. So this next one is one that I don't think I ever watched as a kid, but amongst my evangelical circles, he was huge. So we are going to look at the Donut Man, who I'm surprised I'm able to say this, I think has the most damaging message compared to Patch and Salty.
I went to a Donut Man concert when I was like 6 or
Uh,
7, and I thought I was hot shit.
my exposure to this man was me and my partner voluntarily watching this as adults. We were drunk, of course.
I still vividly remember going with a friend of mine, and it was, of course, at a church because a church is going to welcome you with open arms, and you don't have to pay for that venue because of volunteer labor.
Of course.
Yeah, this is, whew, I am excited for what memory this is going to bring back.
All right, let's see.
Oh, no. I can't believe I was in the same room with that man.
Can I just say that this guy has the amount of charisma and dancing abilities, I guess, as Paul.
You were
Yep.
so correct. Oh my god.
And he's just
Very
as
much
creepy.
so.
Just as creepy.
I would. Mm-hmm.
Now, I had to include that section because the oldest girl in their cast is the one who's constantly carrying around kids.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I noticed
Yes,
that
because
too.
we're going to turn them into little mothers.
Yep, exactly. They're just practicing.
Ugh. Just wait until the donut starts talking.
Yeah, here it is.
There we go.
So, shh, he's asleep, and then let me knock on the counter and wake him up.
Also, he looks more like a bagel.
He does.
It really does.
He was secretly Jewish. Hi.
We're having a fever dream.
Oh god.
Yeah.
I forgot. Jesus is the donut.
Because without Jesus, our lives would be empty and sad. Now, I don't know about you two,
Mm-hmm.
but my last 22 years of life have actually been pretty fulfilling and lots of happiness. I mean, sure, bad things happen too, but, no more than to any of my very devoutly Christian family.
Yeah,
My last few years away from all that has been just very peaceful.
It does wonders when you go through a little bit of trauma therapy and you're finally able to get the intrusive voices to go away on most days. It's so frustrating that as people who have deconstructed largely because of religious trauma, our families, former church friends, etc., all look at us like we're deficient or we are brazenly going against God just to make God angry because we're mad at God. And it's like, we're not really mad at God. We don't like this whole culty business that's happening here, but God and I are okay.
My favorite is, well, you must be like just not joyfully happy all the time because you're not a Christian. And it's like, no, I'm not joyfully happy all the time because I have depression and things that have not been dealt with for God knows how many years. And now I'm dealing with that shit and it's painful.
Exactly.
And unlearning things is a little bit hard. So, but yeah, I absolutely 10 out of 10 would recommend, you know, not dealing with all the shame anymore.
It's so frustrating that not only do they not see the shame that we feel as being well, not necessarily invalid, but like unnecessary or unjustified, they see it as, oh, well, that's God trying to bring you back to Him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, no, no. Trust and believe, even on my darkest days, I am light years better than I was in junior high, high school, or even college. There is absolutely a matter of quality of life that comes from leaving a high control religion that you simply don't believe anymore. And it's almost like they can't understand why we would do it. So it must be Satan. I think part of the
Right.
reason why they do that is because anyone who has doubts, if they have doubts, they want to be able to blame it on Satan and not because there are inconsistencies in the theology and application of theology in their church.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of it too is like, if you dedicate a certain number of years or a percentage of your life to something, you don't want to think that that you've been wrong, or not even wrong, but maybe necessarily like it wasn't the way that you thought. And maybe there were people that had like nefarious mindsets and attitudes that were taking advantage of you. Like that's hard to admit. This is like the way that I've seen my life. It's just been a little bit off all these years.
Also, like acknowledging everything in your life that you've potentially missed out on because of
Ugh.
how you've spent like investing in like religion or whatever.
Somebody posted in the homeschool recovery today about how their father said that they were making their entire personality about being homeschooled because they were trying to talk to their father about, logistical difficulties they have had with interpersonal relationships, with maintaining jobs, with having the necessary skills for a given job, and feeling shortchanged by the experience that they went through as kids. And of course, the dad, gaslights and says, that's just you making it your personality. You're really not that much of a victim. No, I'm sorry. But when I was in my early 20s, especially when I was at college, hey, people be hanging out, talking about what they did in high school, because that was literally just a year or two ago. And so everyone's talking about all of these normal teenage things. And I'm sitting there going, I can't relate to any of that. Not a single thing. I can, however, tell you Bible verses that tell you not to do those things that you were doing.
Well, and then you notice that the students that come in, whether you go to college after being homeschooled or not, but especially, sorry, in a college setting, they're the ones who don't know how to party responsibly per se,
Yeah.
and they're the ones that get blackout drunk and then have no moderation skills or whatever. So that's how I was when I started drinking. It was like, oh my God, this is something that I've always wanted to do because it was so forbidden. And it took me quite a few years to be able to like have a glass of wine and it's okay.
Yeah, I had a very tenuous relationship with alcohol during those first couple of years after I turned 21, and I did a lot of things that, you know, I'm not proud of, and they were definitely bad decisions from an unformed or not fully finished brain. And
Hmm.
I recognize that, I'm exceedingly lucky that nothing ever happened. I never got tickets. I never got alcohol poisoning, blah, blah, blah. But I definitely pushed my luck more than I should have. And it was this, I'm leaving, I'm escaping what I have been stuck in. And so I am going to do all the things. And oh my gosh, this thing is really, really fun. And when I'm drunk, I don't think about all of the stuff that is telling me that I'm sinning in every possible way because I am
Mhm.
trying to leave the church, and I'm gonna die this catastrophic death. Just gonna ruin my life. And you know what? You can actually have a couple years of partying in your early 20s, and by the time you're 40, y'all just sit around with your other 40-year-old friends and talk about the fairly similar dumbass choices that you made when you were 22. And we're
Mhm.
all, relatively well-adjusted adults at this point. It's just kind of something you go through during that age. And I know that things were exacerbated for me because, I was trying to self medicate. Basically, I didn't have access to mental health care. I didn't realize at the time that that's really what I needed. So yeah, it just sets people up to really lose their compass once they are disconnected from the anchor of the church. Once you have to start deciding what you think your morals are, what your boundaries are, what your risks you're willing to take are, when you have to make all of those decisions, it's really not as easy as just following some other person's set of rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they don't have a man and a donut that tell you how to critically think and make logical decisions. It's just like you either do this or you're just out adrift away from God and we can't help you. And it's like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Like, did Schoolhouse Rock ever do logical fallacies? Because I feel like that would have been really helpful.
It really would have. They just said they were thinking about a donut hole.
So, like, they're talking about how the truth is going to wipe away your smile. Most of those kids don't have a smile to begin with.
No, they all look miserable.
Horribly
And they're
miserable.
all scared that the man in the overalls is gonna like yell at them.
We've seen polio yell at kids through the YouTubes to tell them not to overeat. Like, this guy's telling you you're empty inside. There's a sadness and a darkness in you that you can't control. Like,
No,
what on
Also,
earth?
has he
I,
never had a Krispy Kreme donut? Like,
Well,
if
not
my
back
life could,
then,
yeah, I'm like,
I
if my
don't
life could be like a donut, I would love it.
right?
know. Me too. No, I don't know if like me and my partner, because this was the one we watched. I don't know if we were just projecting, but like the alcohol that was probably coming off of this man was intense. Like he looks incredibly drunk throughout the whole
Yes.
thing. Like, and
Yes.
it
Yeah,
progressively gets worse and worse.
Well, I mean, have you ever seen
yeah,
Death to
that's why
Smoochie?
I have it.
Okay, so
I have not either.
homework for you guys. Find Death to Smoochie. It's worth to rent it for like $3.99 or whatever. So it's Edward Norton and Robin Williams, and they play children's
Oh, that's anime.
programming people. Robin Williams is the guy who's been like, what's that guy's name? Boppy, or he's the
Blippi.
Wiggles, Blippy. There we go. Or he's Bluey. Like he is the top rated kids thing. And then he gets caught in a
Mhm.
scandal and gets fired, and Edward Norton's character takes over. He's super crunchy. He wants to teach kids to have apple juice for a sweetener in their snacks, and like make sure they recycle and they give people chances to feel their feelings. And Robin Williams can't stand it. There's this huge like contest between the two of them. It is absolutely fantastic. Edward Norton is phenomenal in his range because like this is the guy that did Fight Club. and he's so
Oh
good
my
at
gosh.
it. So good at it. Anyways, Death to Smoochie is wonderful, but they show that like behind the scenes, all of these different children's entertainers, they're heroin mules, they're coke addicts, they're drunks, they're philanderers, they're hanging out with Yahtzees, and there's just so much bad of all of these like wholesome characters, and I think that is a good cynicism to have because most anything in entertainment is gonna be seedy behind the scenes.
Not Johnny Karate, though. Please tell me y'all have seen Parks and Rec.
No, I haven't, but I've been meaning to.
I watched
Oh,
it
it's so
forever
good.
ago.
Johnny Karate is what's his face's character? The guy who was married to he's one of the Chris's.
Oh,
It's
Chris
not Chris
Pratt.
Pine.
Chris
Yes.
Pratt.
Yes, but back before he was horrible, I choose to just completely separate him from Andy. And Andy was Johnny Karate. He was a
Yeah.
children's performer and he was amazing.
I'm sorry, I can't see that without like feeling like there's something dirty going on.
Yeah.
All of the visuals in this are just, oh god.
Now, this is talking about the prodigal son, and so this kid that's singing is the prodigal son's brother.
I was so lazy with their songwriting.
I know, right?
Wow. Wow. It's hard to love somebody who doesn't know they need it.
The overarching like theme of just like even if you're uncomfortable, let other people like love on you is so gross.
I just cannot stand this whole it sets you up for codependency where you need to be needed. And so your partner is with you because they need something from you. Not that they want you, not that they choose you, but that they need you. And so you're developing a codependency on God, codependency on your family, codependency on your church family. Like you need them to need you, and you find your value in how much people need you. And that is so mind-blowingly toxic.
Yeah, it's not going to set anyone up for a healthy mentality. There's so many reasons that they give for it too. I mean, there are just so many like loopholes that they give of like, oh, well, your body is not your own, it's your partner's. Oh, well, women are supposed to be quiet in the church. No, let's not give abusers any leeway.
Exactly.
None.
It's funny how they will pull out that verse about it's better for someone to put a millstone around their neck and drown in the sea than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. And like they'll apply that to Target having a pride display. They'll compare that to drag queen story hours, but they aren't going to apply it to things like this that set you up for abuse, either right now and or later in your life, and they just can't see the harm in it because they are so fixated on this is what is godly. Doesn't matter if what is godly is harmful. It's what is godly.
Yep.
And it's their interpretation of godly.
Oh, of course.
And they will not be swayed.
They absolutely believe that people who believe differently than them, even if they claim to be Christians, probably aren't going to go to heaven. So they all think they have the secret sauce. It's just a beautiful representation of millennia of the no true Scotsman.
Mm-hmm.
When I took philosophy in college and I learned about all of the different logical fallacies, that really played into the whole deconstruction thing. Because I'm like, wait, I recognize that. I recognize that. I recognize that. And you pulled that thread and we unraveled the whole sweater.
Mm-hmm.
No,
I always love finding what people's threads are, what the thing was for them.
No, that's what mine was too, but it was in high school and like through like atheist YouTube.
Nice.
As opposed to like an actual educational setting, but that same here.
Don't judge me, but I started with Jacqueline Glenn, and it took me a long time to be able to watch a video of hers and realize that I was agreeing with some of the things that she was saying about God and everything, and not feeling like I was going to get struck.
Mm-hmm.
And I slowly was like, maybe this is okay. Maybe this is okay. You know? So
for me,
yeah.
it was what's Mr. Repsion, I think was his name.
Oh yeah.
That was who I started off with, and then I got into like all of them.
Yeah.
YouTube wasn't a thing when I started my deconstruction. That didn't come out for like another 4 years.
I am so grateful to have found the things that I have found, you know, and just like listening through it and like going, oh, it was not just me that thought that. It was not just me that really made me feel a certain way.
Yep.
Just watch this next story and you tell me which person's prayer shows that he knows that he needs God's love.
I'm not so sure I want to fix the donut. The last story made me feel kind of sick. I always thought I was supposed to be better than everybody else.
The Bible isn't for good people. It's for us sinners. And those stories weren't just for you. They showed all of us the sinful stuff that's inside. The amazing thing is that God still loves us. You want to pray?
No, I don't.
We really don't.
I absolutely do not. And also, why are they trying to go around fixing donuts? The only way to fix a donut is to eat it. I don't understand.
Well, and donuts are specifically created with the hole in the middle. So if you want to have a whole donut, like, just don't punch out the middle.
Yeah.
Maybe if God didn't build us with holes in our heart, we'd be okay.
Yeah, that seems like a God flaw there, you know, if there's going to be a Jesus-shaped hole or whatever they used to tell us.
Oh, yes, a God-shaped hole. Oh,
Yes.
boy, that's youth group, circa 1997. But yeah, you know, you're conditioned to think so little of yourself. There's no real benefit or encouragement to actually excel at something, because the only way that you can excel without sin is if the things that you're excelling in are specifically what God has called you to do. And when you're a kid, what you feel called to do is likely different from what your parents think you should be called to do.
Oh yeah, I always love the God doesn't call the qualified,
He
he
qualifies
qualifies
the
the called.
called.
Yeah.
Oh, no. They
It's
say
like
that about
here.
homeschooling. And I'm like, no,
Oh my gosh.
not
Yeah,
having
that's
an
a strong
educational
act.
degree matters.
The absolute shit that came out of people's mouths.
The audacity. Like I could get to the moon if I could package the audacity of people like MacArthur, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And learned everything you learned today, and you don't share it with others. Why? That's kind of scary.
Scary like monsters and stuff?
No, scarier.
Like giants and lions?
No, even scarier. It's a slimy monster that wants to crawl in and out of your heart.
Damn.
Unforgiveness. Can you think of
Well, that's
anything
disgusting.
scarier than not having love, forgiveness, and then not sharing it with others?
The Great Commission through fear. Yeah, we're winning.
I always felt so insulted. And this was something that I spoke about when I was like in the church. Like, don't try to scare me down the aisle. Like, tell me like the facts and give me like whatever, I guess, facts. I use that loosely,
Yeah.
and let me make a decision by myself, but don't try to like scare me to the altar. Pray, don't do that. It felt very insulting, like you didn't think very much of what your opinion was because you couldn't tell people outright and just have them like agree with it.
Yeah, see, I thought I was supposed to be afraid that whole time. It wasn't until, end of high school, beginning of college that I really started to question that because, especially in
Mhm.
college, I was at a fundamentalist university my first year, and the other kids that came from Christian schools had a much more rosy view of Christianity, the Christian life, and what churches are like. And it was shocking to me how many of these people who were also very conservative devout Christians didn't have all of this, like, oh, I'm so scared, I need Jesus. It was a matter of Jesus makes my life better, and so therefore I like Jesus. And I'm so jealous of those people. But as it was, everything was proposed as Satan. What is it? He prowls back and forth, seeking whom he may devour. And everything was just this constant struggle between angels and demons, and you had to pick a side.
Oh yeah, and you better choose immediately,
Yes.
like as soon as possible, because if you I don't know how prevalent this thought process was, but the age of understanding or whatever, that was a thing that my dad talked about,
Yep.
where that was, I guess, his belief, where like, you know,
If you
it's
were
not a certain age, it's
right,
just wherever you can understand.
it's the age of accountability. And typically, they will
Yeah, there
say
we
that
go.
this is for any child who is not able to distinguish right from wrong morally. And some people do a strict interpretation of that. And basically, as soon as the kid knows how to say yes and no to things, they are
Hmm.
above the age of accountability and they're little sinners. That's kind of the Michael and Debbie Pearl view on things. And then you have others that are like, nah, they need to understand like moral gravity. And so it's probably closer to like 11, 12 years old. And that's why the Catholic Church, Lutheran Church, etc., does confirmation at about that age, because they believe that that
Hmm.
is where the age of accountability ends, and you have to teach these kids morality and they can either choose to commit to it or not. But when you talk about evangelicals, there I've seen so many polls about this, and it is frightening how many of us accepted Christ when we were 3 to 5 years old.
Oh, yep. Yep. Right here.
I mean,
Yeah.
of course our families thought it was just this heartwarming, lovely thing that we were so on the ball and our parents were doing such a righteous job of raising us, and it's like, no thanks, you gave us trauma, anxiety, and depression, and now we don't want anything
Mhm.
to do with your belief system, but go off about how that was a good idea.
You scared the shit out of us every week and then finally said, "Are you scared enough to believe you're going to burn forever?" And then we were like, "Yes." And they were like, "See, such good parents."
Now, we are going to do a major contrast and comparison here because we are going to talk about Veggie Tales next. Veggie Tales is actually by Phil Vischer, who is a fairly progressive Christian. He has actually had fallings out with other conservative Christian publishers and such because he has said things in his personal life that are outside of like the fundamentalist doctrines. So I really appreciate some of the progressive stuff that is in VeggieTales versus what we saw in the previous three. There's still some problematic stuff because at its heart, any religion that tells you that you are evil and you must die to yourself because you're evil and let somebody else tell you who and what and how to be, um, I just don't see any way that that can possibly be a healthy thing.
Yeah.
Just saying. We're gonna start with a Veggie Tales moral lesson. We'll start with the God ones before we get into the funny ones.
We were just gonna sing you a little song, that's all. But since you weren't even scared, I guess we'll just be on our way. Yep, see you later.
No, wait. I guess maybe a little song might be nice. Well, since you're in the neighborhood.
Well, if you weren't scared, then there's really no reason, so we'll just be going now.
Sing the song.
Okay, here goes. You were lying in your bed. You were feeling kind of sleepy. But you couldn't close your eyes because the room was getting creepy. Were those eyeballs in the closet? Was that Godzilla in the hall? There was something big and hairy casting shadows on the wall. Now your heart is beating like a drum. Your skin is getting clammy. There's 100 tiny monsters jumping right into your jammies. What are you gonna
I've
do?
been trying very hard not to sing out loud, but I know every word to this song.
No, you don't need to do anything.
What? Why?
Because
Cause
God is bigger
God is
Boogeyman is bigger than Godzilla or the monsters on TV. Oh, God is bigger than the Boogeyman, and he's watching out for you and me.
Get it?
Well, well, no.
Oh. You see, you don't have to be afraid because God is the biggest.
What? Is he bigger than King Kong? Because Kong's a really big monkey and he's kind of scary.
Next to God, Junior, King Kong would look like an itty bitty bug.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, is he bigger than the slime monster? Because he's the biggest monster of them all.
Compared to God, the slime monster is like a teeny little cornflake.
Yeah, but the slime monster can squirt slime out of his ears. Can God squirt
Oh.
slime out of his ears?
Here, Junior.
He's like, that's at least cool.
Right?
What do you see up there?
My curtains. I see lots of stars.
God made
tried, he'd get everything really sticky.
You know what else God made?
What?
He made all the plants and animals and people too.
Wow.
And that's why we don't have to be afraid.
Huh?
You see, everything God makes is very special to him.
That broccoli nose that don't make no
He loves
sense.
them very much. And because he loves them, he takes extra good care of them. So we don't need to be afraid because God is always looking out for us.
I just have to stop
But what
here.
about the people who like bad things happen to them?
It's exactly what I was going to say. Hello to all of the child abuse, child trauma people. No, there was nothing wrong with you. God did not allow that to happen to you. People allowed that to happen to you. And I'm sorry if anyone told you that God would always take care of you and always have your back and make sure you are safe, because that is simply not the truth.
Thank you.
I've had to really make sure that I tell my kids, I'm like, you are safe because the house has locks on it. And like, it's not some like supernatural, like, oh, you're just always safe. You're just always safe. Like, that's not real. That's not a tangible thing that's going to make you feel better. Because it
Exactly.
didn't make me feel better when I was younger.
Yep. It's just heartbreaking to me the way that even the progressive side of things is setting up these horrible expectations for kids to have. It gives this false sense of security. This whole, God's love is unconditional, but he expects you to die to yourself every day. His love is unconditional. But if you don't believe him, you're dead to him. There's just these
Oh, and you're
awful
gonna burn for
lies.
all eternity.
Yeah. It's these awful, awful lies that get told to children. You wonder why they would have ever doubted you as a parent's love. Maybe because if God's
Mhm.
love isn't even that good, there's no way a parent's love is going to be that good. Like, my family wanted to know why I waited until I was 30 to come out of the closet. It was that false sense of security that I had been given for so long that I knew was false. Because if they knew about me, the stuff that I wasn't telling anybody, they would not love me. At least not in any way that mattered. We're going to get off that little triggered stool there. Okay. We're going to breathe into our body. We're going to remember to stay connected. Okay. So let's finish up this song.
Oh, I get it. So you're saying God's the biggest of them all, and he's on my team.
That's right.
Let me back
I
this
love the
up
belly
just
button song.
I had not heard of it until I was setting this up. And I was like, holy cow, how did I miss this? How did I miss this? Oh, wait, it's because I left evangelicalism in 2002. But we're going to get into some fun stuff. We're going to leave on a lighthearted note because everybody, regardless if you're an atheist or whatever at this point, if you grew up with Veggie Tales, you loved Larry's silly songs.
Maybe I know your eyes see right through my disguise. And no one can deny.
Can we all name the Backstreet Boys that this is referencing? Or is it In Sync?
Oh, I think it's In Sync.
Because I'm thinking it's the one with
But
Fatone,
I
and
can't.
that's.
Was
Tell you
Fatone in
something.
Backstreet Boys
No,
or
he was In
NSYNC?
Sync. That's why I'm thinking this is In Sync.
Yeah. But where is Justin Timberlake?
He's already off with Britney Spears, who's an asparagus spear in this.
No, no.
This one's my favorite.
I love the pirates
Do
who don't do anything.
anything. We just stay at home and
We
lie
just stay
around.
home and
And if
lie
you ask
around.
us
And if
to
you
do
ask
anything,
us to
we'll
do
just tell
anything,
you
we'll just tell
we
you
don't do anything.
anything.
Busting in the fall.
I think he was my favorite of the pirates.
Yeah, he's fantastic. I never hoist the mainstay, and I've never swabbed the poop deck, and I've never veered to starboard because I've never sailed at all, and I've never walked the gangplank, and I've never owned a parrot. Never been to Boston in the fall.
Oh my gosh. The silly songs, I bought a CD of the silly songs
Yeah,
that were like this, where it's not really religious.
because what I love about that Pirates Who Don't Do Anything is how, like, they were able to just have fun, and like this concept of sitting around and like I mean I was a pirate that didn't do anything during the pandemic. Like I was not a sourdough starter, I was not learning to crochet, I was eating my weight in ice cream and German chocolate cake.
Mm-hmm.
So I laid on the
Yep.
couch and I didn't do shit.
It's like I very much sympathize and understand and relate to the pirates who don't do anything.
Yes. And the whole where is my hairbrush, because I can't
Oh,
not
yes.
lose things. So, you know, it's so relatable. I think it's important to recognize that all of these pieces of children's entertainment have been very mainstream. Focus on the Family has been huge in promoting a lot of these. We didn't even get into like Adventures in Odyssey or McGee and Me. You know, there's a lot more that specifically focus on the family. We might do a separate whole just focus on the family thing. They have worked really hard to make this super mainstream, and like even the very casual Christians are getting this stuff for their kids and probably not realizing the harmful messages that it's giving their kids. They're like, "Oh, it's got Christian on it, so therefore it's cool." And there is a difference in quality kids entertainment between, say, Bluey and what is that cartoon that Kirk Cameron does?
He does the cartoon.
Yeah, he also wrote some books. It's under the publisher Brave Books because apparently you got to be brave to publish things that happen to be from the most popular religion, most popular
Very,
Well,
leaders
yeah.
within that religion. Like, that's brave, man.
Well, yeah, because the LGBTQIA plus community has Pride Month, so they need brave books.
They've got to bravely stand up to those innocent Target workers and harass and assault them because you're mad that they've got a swimsuit with extra coverage on the bottom. You would think would people with a modesty standard would be all for a little extra fabric to cover between your legs.
Because then they can't see what kind of genitals you have, and then they don't know how to interact with you, and then it's a whole thing.
Ugh, it's so obnoxious. Like I I joked about how I left the church at a really bad time because it was when the moral majority was really kicking off and had lots of people in places of power at that point. I picked a really bad time to come out as gay. We had massive fights going on about marriage equality. And then, as we're seeing an uptick in anti trans bills, that's about the same time that I realized that I was non binary. And I'm like, I just have really fantastically bad timing to put myself into the crosshairs of everything that I see as a moral necessity. That's awesome. I love that I am, you know, the enemy. Entirely sarcastic there. I would really like to actually be, you know, enjoyed by people. It's just frustrating that through these different worldviews, it's just impossible.
No, I realized that I was like queer and like mostly came out socially like right when Trump got elected.
Oh no.
So I relate when it comes to like the bad timing.
Yeah, that still sounds like not a great time.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
The majority of people that I interact with that aren't my family and some of my family knows that I'm like bisexual
Hmm.
and that I, have dated some women, but like my family doesn't know. And right now I'm in a straight passing relationship, with my
Hmm.
partner. And so I just told him, I was like, I don't feel the need to come out to them.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he was like, "You deal with enough from them. Why don't we just?" He was like, "I know that it's not, that you're not proud of anything, but like that seems like a stress that you don't need right now."
Exactly.
No, it is so bizarre to me how straight people just can't understand that concept. So somebody with like my partner's like mental health clinic, I
Mhm.
believe, was over at our apartment, and saw that we had like it was when we first moved into the apartment, and saw that we had like an air up mattress in one of the rooms, and was
Mhm.
like, "Well, why?" And then we're like, "Oh, well, my partner, his parents might come over here. They don't know we're dating. I don't know if they're gonna try to like throw all their old furniture on us or not.
Mhm.
So we're just having that there as a precaution." And she was so baffled by like the fact that my partner just doesn't feel the need to come out to his family. It just kind of blows my mind with like how much shit you see in the media, especially nowadays, with how like dangerous stuff is for queer people anymore, like why that's such a foreign concept to just not like, even if that wasn't going on, like how is it just such a foreign concept to like not understand, like not wanting your family to know every single aspect of your life just to like kind of avoid the drama.
That's been hard for me because it was like, the family, when I grew up, it was like, you are supposed to be so transparent and so open. That weird time in Christianity where it was like the radical honesty kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've come to realize that I'm okay with my family not knowing the things about me that, like, I get to curate what I want them to see because I
Exactly.
live so far away. You can just see on the outside that like I'm doing good and I'm happy. You don't have to know that like it's
Whatever.
yeah,
it
exactly.
this comes back to when we were first talking about Paul and Morgan was saying that there are obligations in being a partner, in being a child or a parent or a sibling or a friend, and we all vehemently were like, no, you
Mhm.
don't owe anyone anything other than what you want to give them and what is healthy for you. There is absolutely nothing saying that you have to be the person that like responds to text messages within an hour in order to be a friend. Like you should be able
Mhm.
to have these, I mean, they're negotiations, but not really. Because, like, when you and a friend are talking about, like, hey, we should, meet up at a certain time, and you kind of feel each other out for, like, how much free time do you have? When are you truly actually available?
You just have to be available at all points in time and I have to know everything and it's like no, you don't.
So, fun
Because
fact, I dated a Christian woman. She was very big about me responding to her messages and calls and stuff immediately. And it was an anxiety thing for her. I had this one weekend where I had absolutely nothing to do. I had taken Zuzu on a late night walk right before I went to bed, so I was like, I am sleeping in. So I slept in until like 10:30 in the morning, and I wake up and I've got multiple missed calls on my phone, like 14 text messages, all freaking out that I'm not responding to her right away. And I was like, excuse me? Like 9 a.m. is like a normal morning. This was an hour and a half. If I am not allowed by you to have an hour and a half to sleep in on a weekend when I have the time and need it physically, mentally, that's not okay. I'm I'm
yeah,
I'm not dealing with that. Like if that's what you need, I am not the one for you.
you can find that somewhere else because it's not going to be
Exactly.
here.
Yep. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Exactly. The only time that I look like a crazy girlfriend was when my partner was supposed to be taking my daughter to daycare.
Oh no.
And so he hadn't woken up like completely before I left for work. And so he had asked me the night before, he was like, make sure that I'm sitting on the couch before you leave. And I was like, okay. But I didn't have time to wait for him to get up. And so I called him like 20 times. And I was like, until he finally answered the phone and he was like, hey, sorry, my phone was by the bed. I was like, I'm sorry, I look crazy. I just wanted to make sure you were awake.
See, that makes sense. Child
Exactly.
needs to be at a place at a particular time. Like, that makes sense. When it's just somebody mad that you're not picking up the phone so you can maybe go get brunch.
It's like, you need to reevaluate because that's something, no, thank you.
And what's so sad to me is that I didn't have the like gumption or even the recognition to set those kinds of boundaries in relationships until like my
Mhm.
mid 30s. Why? Because I was supposed to be a servant, humble and meek.
Well, and it's like they don't, none of these things are communicated to people in the religion. And so it's like, if you don't know that it's a thing, then you just don't even know what to ask for, you know? And it's so like, just give people information. I don't understand why people are so against just giving out information. Let people know what their options are. I mean, for people that say that they want this radical honesty, they sure as shit make sure that nobody else knows that there's other ways to live.
Yeah. They are incredibly dishonest. That's how you get the crisis pregnancy centers that tell women that abortion causes cancer. They will tell you that, you know, you're more likely to die having an abortion than in childbirth, which is fantastically
Very false.
incorrect. You have all of these people and they do these righteous lies because to them the ends justifies the means. And so scaring
Mm.
children in the 80s was totally okay because as long as it turned them into good little Christian soldiers, check mark, done.
Exactly. By whatever means necessary. Oh my God. My youngest listened to that Veggie Tales, the God is bigger than the boogeyman,
Uh-huh.
and it scared her. It did. She finally was like, Mom, I don't want to listen to it. I was like, okay, we don't, that's fine. I'm so sorry. Like, because she was singing along to it. And then she was like, that's scary. And I was like, okay, we can cut it off,
Yep.
you know, because I think her siblings were listening to it. So we cut it off. And it's just like, nobody would ever do that for me. They just were like, get over it.
Correct. Now, I will say when I was very little, like pre-K, I had the vinyl record of Strawberry Shortcake's Exercise album, and
Hmm.
part of it was in an undersea thing, and there was scary music and like sharks and whales and stuff. And I was terrified of it, so my mom would skip that section every time we
Hmm.
listened to the record. And it's wild to me that they were willing to protect me from that thing that I told them scared me. But when I told them God scared me, well, that was a good thing.
The thing that like irritates the absolute hell out of me is how my grandmother will constantly, like every single time she texts me, tell me that she's praying for me.
Oh,
Um,
Hmm.
and like to anyone unaware, my childhood was like very awful, like Turpin family kind of bullshit. I'm reaching a point where like if I wasn't so constantly worried about her well-being, I probably would go no contact. Like if she were to leave my grandfather, I would be going no contact in a heartbeat. Because it's like this is your way of telling me that you care for my well-being. And like when most people tell me that they're praying for me, I really appreciate it. I think it's sweet.
yeah,
Because that's
Hmm.
just some people's way of just saying, "Hey, like I care about you," and
right.
that's nice. But it's like you're worried about my well-being now, but you weren't then concerned at all in the slightest when like the horrific shit was going on, you weren't praying for me then. You weren't caring for my well-being then.
I'm right there with you. Like when I was a terrified kid thinking I was going to die of AIDS in my 20s because of what they said about gay people, nobody was trying to cushion the blow of that for me. They made sure to let me know that they would love me even if I was a murderer. That doesn't make me feel better. That makes me feel worse. And of course, they didn't necessarily know that at the time because I wasn't telling them why I was worried about it. But it's just so frustrating to have tried on so many occasions to connect with family about this is why this hurts.
God, I'm so sorry.
And it's like, I really love you guys. At one point, you were my heroes. But at this point, you are nothing but painful for me. Blood is thicker than water because they only teach you that part of the phrase, not the
Yeah.
blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It's this horrible divide that gets put in between family members, friends, etc. And I honestly think that this is what they were talking about when they said that Jesus did not come to unify, he came to divide. He came to put the son against the father, the niece against her aunt.
Yeah, I always had such a I feel like I asked too many questions as a child. I wasn't a good Christian because I asked too many questions. Things like that when they would talk about, the King James is the only, version you should use because that was the kind of church I was raised in. I remember going like, but how do we know that that's God's word? This was a long time after like Jesus walked the earth. And it was like, well, because that's what God said. That's kind of circular reasoning. And that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. And there's still things that I'm like, how has nobody just thought about this one question and been like, huh?
Well, there's so much of God said it, I believe it, that settles it.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever is in the infallible, inerrant, literal word of God, and everyone has this biblical literalism that they're playing into, you got to choke down a lot of hypocrisies and dialectics to make the entire Bible literal.
Yeah, but then it's like they're not even really 100% like the same on what needs to be taken literally and what's like not literal.
Yeah. They can't
It's just
agree on
really
any of
whatever.
that. It's just like
Mhm.
soteriology. It's a constantly moving set of goalposts depending on who your preacher is and what area of the country you're in, and it's a whole thing. It's frustrating because we get this confused doctrine given to children who ask innocent questions and are gaslit from toddlerhood.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. It really is.
All right, well, I am going to call us to a close. I thank y'all for being here with me. Of course, make sure to like, subscribe, and share to help the channel out. We hope to see you again next week.
See you soon.
I was gonna say something fun for the outro, but I couldn't think of anything.